Now, sometimes the Lord sends me messages in indirect ways, and this time He's given me a little bit of a virus, very mild. I usually toss it off very quick. But the unique thing is that even as I talk, it vanishes away. They used to say, my mother used to say, the reason why they always serve cheese with pie, the stomach has to work so hard to digest the cheese, it digests the pie. And we always often find in the camp some little piece of cheese. So for this first day, I'm furnishing a little virus that takes the place of the cheese for me, and as I pray that off, then everything's going to be, all your other little problems will be taken care of wonderfully. Now, I like to know at the beginning whether the acoustics are good and if you can hear all right. If there's anyone has any difficulty hearing, you should take a front seat, or I will talk informally and quietly, especially this first day. So happened that 35 years ago, I went to the greatest nerve specialist in the Northwest and asked him what was the matter with me, because I seemed to be about 1/3 efficient. And after he looked me over very carefully, he said, well, you'll be all right if you content yourself with always being 1/3 efficient. You should content yourself with doing just 1/3 of a man's work all your life. You've inherited your mother's nervous organism, and you don't have any business teaching. Well, I couldn't conceive of being content doing 1/3 of a man's work, so I opened the Bible and found a passage which said, commit thy ways unto the Lord, trust also in Him, and He will bring it to pass. In that I got my orders. If I just committed all my ways to Him and trusted, not just committed them, but trusted Him, He would look after the results. All I had to do is look after the intentions. So I saw to it that my intentions were very good when I went to my classes. And the results were so tremendously good, the classes doubled in size and doubled in results, and when the day was over, I hadn't done any work. Because I hadn't been under any strain, I hadn't been trying to get any results. You might say I tried not to get any. I just thought I'd see the Lord what a hard job it was that I'd had. Make Him do the whole thing, and He did it so much better. When the day was over, I hadn't done any work. I just gone to parties. They just had a coffee break like you did just now, and passed some ice cream and cake. I'd known that there'd been parties, so I sat down late in the afternoon, wrote an article for the Atlantic Monthly just for fun. I got so much fun doing it that the Atlantic accepted it. And then in the evening, the Methodists wanted me to tell them my new secret. And the next night, the Baptists, and then the Presbyterians. And after about a month had gone by, I found I was giving more sermons or talks on prayer than the ministers was. I was doing full-time preaching and full-time teaching and full-time writing. I was doing 3 men's work, not just 1/3 of a man's work, so I hurried around to the great nerve specialist to tell him my secret. His secretary said he died while you were gone. So I came hurrying down here as fast as I could to tell you my secret before any of you die, so that you'll start doing 3 times as much work as you ever did before. Now, all my grandparents died before they were 60. My father retired as a worn-out old man at 63, although he had been raised on the farm and he had a lot of stamina. So I figured when I got to be 63, I'd have to retire. But now at 74, I'm doing 3 times as much work as I could do 30 years ago. And I've written a book a year for the last 7 years. And the only time I have to write a book, because I'm speaking 9 months of the year, is between 5 and 7 in the morning, and I have to prop myself up and do it. And that's one reason why I'm going to take, the Lord is sending these books to me so fast, I finally decided I should, I should slow up just a little bit for a few months, and then I'll be able to start out doing 4 men's work. I expect next year I'll do 4 men's work, but this year I thought I would like to concentrate on a most wonderful thing. It is so wonderful that if I told you some of the stories, some of the Mother Goose rhymes and fairy stories that God is interpreting spiritually, or though you'll find the ministers won't need anything but the Bible in that book for all the sermon material they'll need. Well, now I'm here because of a miracle. Take a good look at me, because you go back to Des Moines, Iowa, go out to Greenwood Cemetery, and you go out to the cemetery where my father and mother's bodies lie. You'll probably open your eyes pretty wide, because you'll see a grave there beside theirs. Here lies little Glenn Clark. How did I ever get out? It's a miracle. Biggest miracle ever happened. Jesus rose from the dead, but I'm going to tell you a different kind of a miracle. I surely should have been there, but I'm going to tell you why I didn't. A man saved my life that I never saw. He never even came to this country. He never even left the shores of France. How many of you would like to know how he saved my life? Put your hands up. All right, now you're getting curious. Now you're going to have some suspense. A man named Louis Pasteur is a chemist. He wasn't even a doctor. He went to a hospital and he found 7 women had died of childbirth fever in adjacent cots, all treated by the same doctor. And he told the physicians all those lives could have been saved. And you know what they did? They pounded the table. They insulted him. They persecuted him. They shouted into his ear, "You mean to tell us something 10,000 times smaller than a flea can kill a person?" They laughed him to scorn. He had a breakdown and finally survived. That is about 1870. And little Glenn Clark, my father married a very healthy young woman. She died of childbirth fever, and little Glenn Clark had died 6 weeks afterwards of childbirth fever. 12 years went by, and Father married a very delicate lady. Very sweet, lovely, but very delicate lady. She had 6 children. I was the first son. They named him Glenn Clark. And I'm here instead of there because in the 12 years before I was born, Pasteur finally persuaded the physicians finally of the whole world that something 10,000 times smaller than a flea can kill a person. And ever since, I have been preaching this, that the smaller and the more invisible a thing is, the more powerful it is. Now, here's a boy sitting there. If I'd ask him what is the most dangerous animal, he'd probably say a lion, but he'd probably correct it. I might say a lion, he'd say no, a Bengal tiger, and he'd be right. A Bengal tiger is the most dangerous animal. If a Bengal tiger got in this room, you know what the women would do? They would every one let out the most terrific shriek, and it'd scare us men to death, but the poor Bengal tiger would be scared worse than we. He'd go out the first door he'd get out. But if a little fly comes in here, and one of us is a carrier of typhoid, and he gets in our soup, and then he gets in your soup, and pretty soon he give everybody typhoid. Now, smaller than the fly is the malaria mosquito. We went around the world, and we had mosquito nets. We had to climb in under the bed, under a mosquito net. And one mosquito got in there where I was. It so happens that the malaria mosquitoes kill 2 million people a year, far more than the Bengal tigers do, even more than the flies do. I got busy, and I sent that little mosquito to heaven. I sent him to heaven soon, because otherwise I might have been in heaven. But I'm going to tell you that mosquitoes don't kill so many people as germs. You can see a mosquito, but you have to use a microscope to see a germ. Over in Berlin, they call them germs. In Paris, they call them parasites, and in Dublin, they call them microbes. But whatever the name, they're invisible to the naked eye. And they're more dangerous than mosquitoes. Far more dangerous than flies are mosquitoes. I happen to have one right now, invisible. I don't know how he got there. And you're going to see a miracle happen the next day, the way he's going to leave, because I'm going to use a method that we've discovered at the camps is more effective than even medicine. However, you can't see them except in a microscope. But I'm going to tell you something more dangerous than microbes and germs and parasites, because you can't see them even with a microscope, and they're anger and fear. Now, when I said fear, you should just do this. I ought to have exhibits here. So, now you represent fear. You represent anger. Now, more danger in those two faces. Trouble is, I don't see any anger and any fear around here. But I do want to say this. If there's anything the matter with you, you'll find that anger and fear are the parent of all the vices. Anger is the parent of all the masculine vices, and fear of all the feminine vices. And you go into a hospital, and you'll find over half the bed cases are not germ cases. They're mental and nervous cases, stung by the yellow fever mosquito of anger, or the yellow mosquito of fear, or some of their little progeny, like self-pity, or self-condemnation, sense of guilt, all those things. They're all the little progeny of those two. You'll find over half the bed cases in the hospitals are mental and nervous cases. Then you go to the germ cases. You'll find 80% of them would be cured just like that. If they could just wipe off the anger and fear. The result is the doctors are commencing to discover that you mustn't treat a disease, sick kidney or sick lungs. You got a sick soul. A doctor in a little town of Minnesota, a little town of Raymond, he's the only doctor there, and he said, they just wear me out. They come so fast, and the patients, and they don't give me time to really cure them, because I know what's the matter. It's back up back behind. But he said, there's one thing I can't understand. Why do they all have, half the people there have anemia? Anemia, not leukemia, that's very dangerous, but anemia. I said, anemia is lack of joy in the blood. Mrs. Browning, what was her first name? Barrett, Elizabeth Barrett. She was anemic. Nobody loved her. Father was mean to her, just dominated her. Nobody had fallen in love with her. She had to just at home write poetry. Then Robert Browning read her poetry, and he came in. And he fell in love with her. And she got joy, and all her blood just changed into red corpuscles from the other kind, and she just hopped up, and they got on they didn't have airplanes in those days, so they just eloped. Cured. So I said, in that little town, you tell them to have a good time. Get joy. Tell them to go to a movie if that'll give them joy, or even play cards, or read a novel, something that'll make them happy. Or even go to a dance. He said, well, now I know what's the matter. All those that have that, they attend the Lutheran church. The minister says they mustn't play cards, they mustn't read a novel, they mustn't go to a dance, they mustn't have any fun at all. I will then let them come to a camp farthest out, and you'll give them some joy there and cure them. Why, you can just put your finger on it like that. The doctors are discovering that. So we're going to, if any of you have any particular ailments, we'll try to find that cause behind it. So a woman came to me, and she had a goiter and a tumor. She said, I'm in such a frail condition, the doctor said an operation would be fatal. And I knew how Jesus put things in parables, so I thought I'd find out her trouble by a parable, and I said, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a Mrs. Smith who had a little Ford car and a little Ford garage, and she was happy. Till Mrs. Jones next door got a Cadillac in a big Cadillac garage. Mrs. Smith didn't need a Cadillac, but she wanted to keep up with the Joneses, and so she kept wanting a Cadillac. So finally she got one. If you want anything hard enough, you'll get it. And she put it in the garage. It was too big, and it stuck out. Now, where it sticks out, we'll call that a growth. Can you think of something that you wanted that was not in your divine plan? Something where you were jealous or envious of somebody else, and you wanted it in order to keep up with the Joneses? She kind of blushed, and after a while she said yes. She said it made her feel terribly frustrated. No, she couldn't have it. I said, are you willing to relinquish it now? And will you tell me what it was? And she told me. Are you willing to relinquish it now? And she said, I surely will, if that's what's the cause. I said, of course it is. We'll just throw it out the window. And now you take the Lord's Prayer and hand me the Lord's Prayer over there. And you'll find there's a chapter on the divine plan. You shake this up every morning, just like you shake up a bottle of medicine, and read that divine plan. Do that for 3 weeks, and I'll pray for you. And it'll make you so contented as you read that with the divine plan for you, you won't look to see what others are receiving. And I can pray for you with power. At the end of 3 weeks, she wrote me, my goiter and my tumor are both vanishing away, and I won't need an operation. That led me to write a book on how to find health through prayer. You might hand me that, but you don't need to. You don't need to. I'm just doing a little showmanship up here now. Pull them out, you see. Show you how these things get. That's the way my books haven't been written. In which I found there's an emotional cause behind these things, and I put them in, and a few years later, the Reader's Digest, the Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal, they came out by articles by doctors all over the country, just almost repeating word for word what I had said and giving exactly the same causes behind the diseases that I had given. So this person, wanting something that wasn't in the plan, that was more dangerous than a mosquito bite would have been, or a virus. It brought something in. You know, some girls that go to college and don't have any boys' attention. Sometimes they get obese. They kind of take it. They have to have some fun, and everybody else is doing. They just want to, so they'll just sit down and eat a lot. And even while it may not be growth in one way, it may be in another. And Dorothy Larson, head of the class, and her neck began right here. She was just so, but such a wonderful girl. But nobody ever cared for her. She never had any attention or anything. But she was just so fat. Well, that word obese has to be used there, which isn't such a good word, obese. And Ruby Rosskelly didn't have any daughter of her own. And when she graduated and she wanted to go into the nursing, and Ruby's husband was a doctor, she got her to come and just stay with her, and guided her in her nursing until she got so happy. Why, she got the shape like a Venus de Milo. Just changed in her attitude. Well, now I'm just telling you these things. I'll be on this basis. I'll tell you something happened down at Birmingham. There's a woman there named Mrs. Coles. I know I flew. I was flying to Greenville. And it was too low, and I couldn't land. And they took me down to Atlanta. And I said, well, I don't know nobody in Atlanta. I have to spend the night in Atlanta, and then they'll send me back. And the ceiling's too low, so they took me down to Birmingham. And I could land there. I said, now, I know a Mrs. Coles. And so I looked up the Coles, they're C-O-L-E-S. There's just about 152 Mrs. Coles. Then I said, oh, stop to think about it. She spells her name C-O-W-L-E-S. And there's only one. So I called her up. Well, a woman wanted to see me out there in her home. Very much. She came in, she said, I have cancer of the breast. I'm sure it is. Doctor says it is. And I want you to pray about it. And I said, now, if you have a great craving for something that's not in the plan, but no malignancy, no resentment in it, it manifests as a growth. But if you get some malignancy, some resentment, it may become malignant. So can you tell me of anything where you have resentment? And she couldn't tell me of a thing. It left me rather unprepared. I said, it's too bad. I kind of wished you'd think of something. She couldn't. Then she wanted me to pray for her little daughter who had asthma. I don't dare let her out of my sight, she said. It's my only child, and I just live there, almost like in a prison with her all the time. She's just crazy to go to a Girl Scout camp, and I just won't let her go this summer. And I said, well, you know what causes asthma? For grown-ups, it's self-pity, and with children, it's being tied to the mother's apron string. You'll find any child with asthma, when they go away to college, they get cured just like that. So when they leave the mother's domicile, one of the quickest cures. I said, best thing in the world, let it go. Oh, I don't dare. I just don't dare. Well, we prayed, and she went out. And then the front doorbell rang, and Mrs. Coles had gone off and left me to be all alone there, so I just went to see who it was coming, and it was this lady coming back. She said, on second thought, I just dawned on me, I do have some resentment. I kind of hate to say it, but it's against God or against fate. I see all the mothers going to their clubs and their parties and their things they want to go to, and I'm just held like a prisoner with my little daughter. And there's a hidden resentment there. I said, now here's a way by which you can kill two birds with one stone, or cure two birds with one stone. You let your daughter go to the Girl Scout camp, and then you go to all the clubs and all the movies and everything you wanted to do and just have the time of your life. Now, believe it or not, in the fall, I got a letter from Mrs. Cole saying they were both cured. I don't know of anything that happened two ways like that. Every once in a while, something happens that's almost unbelievable. It just fits like that. And because I tell those things, don't think that they happen always just like that. But that happened just exactly like that. Well, now I see you get looking serious. Every one of you worried for fear you got some fear or something. You're going to have you're going to have an ulcer or something. Now, you don't get ulcers unless you have a sense of inadequacy. Men who have big jobs that are a little too big for them sometimes get them. So we're going to just, the whole way to keep happy and well is to keep happy and good. Well, as I said, anger is the fear of all the masculine vices and fear of all the feminine vices. And how do you get rid of fear? By just walking right up to it and accepting and being unafraid. And there's a Frenchman that was known as Mr. Milk Toast of his area because he was so timid. And when he went into the First World War, they said he'll be home as a coward, but he came back with all the medals, the most heroic man of his division. They asked him what he did. He said, well, I figured it out that just sat down and thought it out, and I figured there'd be two alternatives. I'd either be called to the colors or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was called to the colors, there'd be two alternatives. I'd either be sent to the front or left in the rear, and if left in the rear, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was sent to the front, there'd be two alternatives. I'd either be under fire or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was under fire, there'd be two alternatives. I'd either be hit or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. And if I was hit, there'd be two alternatives. I'd either be hurt seriously or mildly, and if hurt mildly, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. And if I was hurt seriously, there'd be two alternatives. I'd either die or get well. And there'd be nothing to be concerned about. And if I died, there'd still be two alternatives. Well, I don't care how you work it out, but I have found, and I've told in my book, Story of My Life, A Man's Reach, how I was plagued with palpitation of the heart that used to simply scare me to death. And I finally found myself out in the high mountains of Colorado, where that heart would just go like a trip hammer, and I was off away all by myself. And I looked out the window, and I saw a great snow-capped mountain, and I said, Lord, I'm your man. I'm helpless. I can't even call on somebody to talk to me and kind of get my mind off of this. If I could do that, I was at home. I could wake my wife up, and that's what I used to do. And I needed to get over that fear. The more frightened I got, the faster the heart would go. The faster it would go, the more frightened I got, and there I was, just nothing to save me. I was just going to pass out. So I said, now, Lord, I'm your man. I'm out here on the limb where I can't do anything. But I'm going to tell you I'm your man. From now on, I'm going to do everything in your honor. And I'm going to write. I've written one book, and I think I can write another one. Perhaps I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. So, Lord, I put myself in your hands. You can do anything you want to with me. Take me to heaven tonight if you want to, but remember this, Lord, if anything happens to me, it'll be your hard luck and not mine. Well, you know, I came down from that mountain, and the palpitation stopped and never came back again. I just willing to accept the very worst without any fear. And there's some things you say it's pretty hard to accept. But I have found, put yourself under God's hands and just, well, at least I got rid of the fear, and then I got rid of the anger by seeing everybody as perfect. But you say you're not some of you may say I'm not a good disposition. I'm a kind of grouchy, and I don't like everybody. Well, I don't know if I like everybody. I love everybody. Some people get on my nerves, but I'll tell you, phonograph records get on my nerves. But I want to say, if a phonograph got on my nerves, I wouldn't take the whole Victrola out and chop it up and burn it up in the alley. And if a man gets on my nerves, and I don't take him out and say, take him down to the gas chamber and burn him up. No. I can see up underneath it all there's something perfect in him. At least he was made by God. And so I've made it a special point not to hate people, and that's where a great deal of my strength lies. I can go into detail on that. But I find that your enemies give you a chance to forgive, and that brings out the greatest in you. How many of you ever heard of Mary Sutton down in North Carolina? Put your hands up. Be interesting to just bring her in here, wouldn't it? Just bring her in by the nape of the neck. Stand her up here and say, now, just let me wind you up. Now you just run here for 5 minutes. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What did she do? There wouldn't be a dry eye in the house, would there? And you'd never forget it. And you know where her power is, and it's so tremendous? When she got up and told her story, she began by saying that I love my God. And my God was my earthly father, my human father. For 35 years, I just worshipped him. When he got to be an old man, he was working as a night watchman, and a brutal convict broke in and murdered him brutally. And I was so filled with hate, I simply collapsed. And then I became drunk for 5 months. And then I asked the Alcoholics Anonymous to get me out of the hospital, and I came to a Camp Farthest Out. He said, 4 years ago, my cup runneth over with whiskey. 2 years ago, it ran over with love. And they said, you've got to forgive that man. And then, that's more, you've got to love that man. So she just got down on her knees out there in a little chapel in the woods, and she just prayed until she could forgive him and love him. And then when she went back, she used all her influence, through many waters and everybody that had influence in the penitentiaries, to get him out so she could open the doors by which she could get in and tell him she had forgiven him. And they said, that's impossible. Then what did that little rascal of a lady do? But she said, now, Len Clark said, your prayers can be answered, and I'm going to pray that he gets out. And she prayed with such power that pretty soon the news came that this horrible convict had broken out. And she clapped her hands with joy, and she phoned the detective to help her to find him. She prayed that he'd come to her house so she could tell him. And the detective came, and a whole automobile load of detectives, and they said, that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to come here, he's going to kill you, and I'm going to sit in here all night with my gun. We're placing detectives at every every block all around here, and we're all under orders to shoot him at sight. You'll never see him alive. Well, next night he went into a hamburger shop to get a hamburger, and a bus driver came in and said, "Officer, I think the man you were looking for just got off this bus." He went right out, and he took him prisoner at once, put him in shackles, took him up to the hotel, and he phoned to Mary Sutton, and she went. She said, "The man you want to see is here." And she asked him if he knew anything about God. No. Did he know anything about prayer? No. That's too bad. "Well, I'll pray for you." Then she looked up into his eyes and said, "God has forgiven you. I have forgiven you. God loves you. I love you." And the tears came to his eyes, and he said, "Thanks, lady." I saw a picture of him after he'd committed that terrible crime. It was the face of a fiend, the most terrible face I'd ever seen. I saw him being led off by the detective, and it was the face, one of the finest, loveliest faces, a face that was redeemed. He found that there's such a thing as forgiveness. So she said, "A few years ago, my cup runneth over with whiskey. Now it runneth over the love. This year I bought a bucket to hold the love." Frank Laubach said you should kick the bottom out and let it flow out to others, not just keep it yourself, so I kicked out the bottom. And the ministers asked me to come to the church next Sunday and tell them about this.